Hello everyone and welcome to my new video. In today's video I want to share my thoughts on ILFORD Ortho Plus, an ISO 80 black and white film. For those who are regular viewers of this channel, you might have already seen that I published two videos where I was shooting this film. And for those who are new to the channel and you just stumbled across this video, and if you're interested in seeing me shooting some of the photos that you will see in today's videos, you can go ahead after you've seen this video and check out those other videos as well. Also, if you are new to the channel and you like this type of content, or after you've checked out the other videos and you like them, please consider subscribing. With this out of the way, let's get started. Before I get into the photos that I took with the film and walk you through them and discuss certain aspects of the film, I want to start off this video by reading out what ILFORD says on their website about this film, so that we can put that in contrast to what I'm going to show you later. So let's get to the website. ILFORD says on their website that this is a 35mm ISO 80 orthochromatic black and white film with fine grain and sharpness, perfect for stunning landscapes. What we can also see here on the website is that they say that it can be processed and handled in deep red safe light. We'll discuss about the reason in a second. And then further down in the product description, they say, ideally suited for landscape photography, the blue and green sensitivity of the emulsion enables the film to be handled in deep red safe light conditions, making processing and inspection easier. So what does this mean in a nutshell? So this is a very special film. Like the description already hints towards, there's something going on with the reds here. So this film is less sensitive to reds, which means that anything that is kind of like orangey or red will turn darker in your photos, and the blues and greens will be brighter in contrast. And also what I like about this film is, if you're a beginner and you want to get into developing your own black and white film and you're having trouble or are afraid of this dark back process or a dark room where you have to handle your film in absolute darkness before you are able to develop it or expose it to the chemicals, with this film, if you go to a dark room that has this safe, deep red light, you can basically roll this film on the film reels for your development tank while actually looking at the whole process, and you don't have to do it completely blindly. So this is actually really nice. But now let's take a look at a couple of shots that I took with this film, and let's see what does it mean that it is more sensitive to the greens and blues and less sensitive to the reds. So let's take a look at a landscape, what it is advertised for first, and let's get through it. In this shot we see a landscape with grass in the foreground and evenly lit blue sky. In the back we see forests, also shadowy areas. So this photo was taken in the late afternoon, early evening. Still handheld, so ISO 80 is not a problem. What I wanted to try here is, first of all, the sensitivity to green and blue. And indeed, we see how bright the sky is. I really love the sharpness. We can see it in the grass especially, and the leaves. And we can also see how fine the grain is. You can almost not see any grain in the sky. In this first shot, we can say that it fulfills everything that ILFORD is promising on their website. So we have sharpness, we have very fine grain, and we definitely can see the sensitivity to green and blue, and how it renders landscape, so to say, by not being sensitive to red, more or less. Let's take a look at the next shot now. In the second shot, we see a turbine in front of some trees. And what is special about the shot, especially with this orthochromatic film, which is not so sensitive to red, is that this turbine was actually of a reddish color. So by being less sensitive to red, but being sensitive to green and blue, What is very interesting is how we have a subject separation here. Of course, this is special because of the colors in this shot, but what we can see is that it almost gives a three-dimensional look to the photo. And this is something that is very interesting about this film if you have these greens and reds in the same photo. With this last shot, we saw one of these special effects, so to say, that you can get out of ILFORD Ortho Plus. And this is something that is really amazing about this type of film. Let's now take a look at the third photo. The first thing that you might realize in this shot is how grainy the sky is. And I want to point out that the reason why the sky is grainy, or the whole image is a little bit more grainy, is that I had this roll, the first roll of ILFORD Ortho Plus that I shot, developed at a lab, and the lab was not familiar with the film stock, I guess, and something got wrong or was messed up in the development process of this film, which now cannot be recovered in scans. Nonetheless, what we can see is how it renders the greens, how the sky is very bright because it is a blue sky, and we shall just not pay attention to the grain in this photo. But overall, we can also see how sharp and how strong this film is in these types of situations. One more nature shot and then we will switch topics. In the next shot, I took a photo of a swan in the lake of Zurich. And what I wanted to find out in this shot is, first of all, how it will render the lake, because the lake in Zurich has this blue greenish color in summer, so exactly where this film is sensitive to. But what I also wanted to try in this shot is the dynamic range, because the swan is absolutely white and I took the photo in bright daylight. So what I wanted to find out is how it preserves the highlight. And if you look at the swan, it preserves them beautifully. So here we again see the dynamic range of this film is amazing, and it really shows how pro level this film is. Let's now move over to architecture and street shots to see if this film is of any use in these kinds of situations as well, beyond the advertised stunning landscapes. Let's take a look at the first architecture shot. What we see here is this neutral concrete gray in front of a red chimney and a blue sky without any clouds. And what we can see here is again how the subject separation works if you play with blues or greens and reds. So here we see that the red brick chimney becomes very dark and the sky is just evenly lit, amazing grain, amazing sharpness, just beautiful. So in these kinds of scenes, if you have basically reds in your architecture or street shots, this film works very well, again, if you want to separate the subject. All right, and now one more architecture shot. In the next one, I was curious how the dynamic range of the film is. So what we see here is a shot where some parts of the building are in bright daylight, and we also have some pure white to see. And also we have shade areas or shadow areas. And what we can see in this shot is definitely, again, the sharpness and the low grain, but also how it retains the shadows. This is amazing. So we have deep shadows and we can still spot some detail, as well as this white in the front where there should be a menu card. And we can see that the highlights also preserve all the details. So this is really, truly amazing about this film. And now I'm briefly throwing in my last architecture shot that I'm going to show you of a building here in Zurich. And what I wanted to see here as well is how does it preserve the highlights, how does it render neutral grays, and what does it do with the shadows. And also here we can see that the film absolutely delivers. So what we can say is that you can easily use this film for your architecture shots, especially if you are looking for a lower ISO film, if you do not want to shoot some ISO 400 film like ILFORD HP5 or Kodak Tri-X, for example, if you're just in this super bright light and you need something that is a little bit lower ISO. So with these architecture shots out of the way, let's go back to nature and see where you can also use it. Here we see some poppy seeds in grass, and it shows again the strength of the film by being less sensitive to red. That means the poppy seed flowers are really dark. The film is sensitive to greens, so the greens are really light, and we see again this beautiful subject separation that you get with this film, which you would not get with a regular panchromatic film, where everything will be a little bit more grayish. And here you really have bright and dark, and you can separate the subject. What we can also see again is that the film is amazingly sharp. And now onto a surprise shot. When I took the next shot, I didn't realize what is actually going on here. Let me show you. So here we see an Audi convertible, and we see that the back or the rear of the car obviously has some kind of different panel than a front. To be honest, when I was on scene and I saw the car, which was a red orangey car, I didn't realize this when I took the photo. For me, this was an orangey, red colored Audi convertible. But then when I got the film developed and I got it back, this is also, by the way, from this roll that I got developed in the lab that has a lot of grain, unfortunately. But to my surprise, I saw that this rear is darker than the front. And then I went back to the recordings that I did when I was shooting the video for this scene. And only by then looking at the video material and looking really closely at the car, I realized, yeah, there is something going on with the back. So obviously the owner of this car had the back replaced at some point in time, and this ILFORD Ortho Plus, being more sensitive to the reds, picked out these differences very well. So here you almost think that this car has two different colors, whereas with the normal eyes it looks more or less like the same. So this is very special about the film, and here it shows beautifully what you can do if you really use this film to its fullest potential. Let's now move on to the next one, which again is a nature shot. In this photo I shot directly towards the sun. What I like to do when I try out a new film is take the film into all these kinds of situations that you've already seen in the previous photos, as well as like this one, where I try to stress the film. I try to kind of like find out where its limits are. And usually they are in the dynamic range somehow, or the resolution or the grain. But in this case, again, you see here a photo that I took while shooting against the sun. We see how well it preserves the dark passages of this photo. At the bottom, in the shadows, the grass is beautifully lit. You can still make out details, although we're photographing again against the sun. So this is amazing. We can even see that there are like two people walking, and so on and so forth. So this is very special about the film, especially here again. We have the green grass where the film is very sensitive, so it brightens them up. We have the bright blue sky, and here we can really see how this film shines when it comes to dynamic range, or at least from what I've seen so far, I must say, this is truly astonishing. I have not seen this yet personally in black and white film. On to the last shot now, where I've pointed the camera again directly towards the sun. In this shot, I went down on my knees to capture the silhouettes of these flowers while facing the sun. What we can see again is that the film captures the shadows so beautifully, preserves basically all the details in the shadows that you could hope for in a film. And also you can see on the upper left corner of this photo how the film tries to preserve the blue of the sky by rendering it gray. And also you see almost no grain. This is truly astonishing. I love this photo, and I was so surprised when I saw the results in scan after I developed this film myself. These were my two thoughts on ILFORD Ortho Plus. I'm sure some of you might have also 2 cents or 5 cents. How about we put all our cents together in the comments and have a nice discussion? I would actually be interested to hear from you guys where you have shot the film already, where you think it has its strength. Also, if you haven't shot it yet and you got curious about the film after having seen this video and the shots that I showed you, I would also be happy to learn from you what you're planning to shoot with this film as soon as you try it. I personally am not so sure when and how often I will shoot this film going forward. I typically shoot ILFORD HP5 and FP4 most of the time, and just very rarely Pen F and ISO 50 black and white film. And I'm not 100% sure where I should put this film, because somehow, yes, it has these amazing properties to basically pop something out, to make this beautiful contrast between red, blues and greens. But if I look at my typical, let's say 36 frames roll, maybe 2 or 3 times in a roll I would have this situation at maximum. So I cannot really leverage a whole roll of ILFORD Ortho Plus unless I would have a dedicated project that makes use of the strength of this film. So as a general purpose film, I would say, yes, it is a very good film. Yes, it is nice that it is an ISO 80 film, but I am not sure yet if it will replace my FP4 in the low ISO, and for sure not HP5, which is my go-to black and white film. But I can clearly see how sharp and amazing this film in general is. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope you learned something. I hope you like this type of video. And yes, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.